Nafal Habayis Olav Olav, the house collapsed. And Reuben was there with his father Yaakov, and the house collapsed and landed on both of them, or Olav on Marishav, or on Reuben and his uncles who would basically bequeath to him. The Olav, and the thing was, there was a two from outstanding debts to Reuben. Either his wife, he owes it to now that he's dead, or Bartok, or he died language that have has debts too. And the question is, he himself is destitute. He owns nothing. The Yarshim of Ben Message, the Yarshim of the father don't want to pay any of these debts, so they argue that Reuben died first, and therefore he never inherited his father Yaakov. And we're going to, whatever we inherit coming directly from Yaakov. We're bypassing Reuben altogether. So the debts, you debtors so you creditors have no connection at all to these assets. And the father died only afterwards. But about the way around. The father died first, and therefore Reuben inherited his portion of his father, or his portion from his uncles, and therefore we now have a shibud on it. So what do we do here? Beishamai says yes, like Beishamai says neither of them have more of a control over these assets than the other. And why is that? The Yochim, obviously the Torah says he inherits, but remember in Satan of Kavhede, Beishamai says that a star of Aymed Ligba is Kigabudame. He said that when you have a contract in your hand, it's as if you already have no assets. And even though Beishamai argues there all the time, but if you're chefs, we always rely on this idea that a star is like a music. To a certain degree, not full degree like Beishamai's full degree, to the extent that we say migul to take away from somebody who's not strong enough, but it's not a star. It's like a migul hachzik. Beishamai. But we don't follow Beishamai completely partially. So the bottom line is the Baal Chayv also has an anchor over here. It has a chayv and a star, and the Ksuba has a star, and the Yoshim have their thing. So therefore, who's more movement than the other? We don't know. Nobody knows exactly who died first. So whatever there's a subject, we divide equally. And they still, he holds that a star is not considered as if you already have it in your hands. So who owns the assets? The Yoshim, naturally. So therefore, the Baal Chayv has to prove, or the wife has to prove that her husband or this borrower died after his father. Says that it's nobody argues in that principle. It's one of the eyes you bring that up. You're not a Muslim. Why are you a Mason? You need to extract it from exactly, because the star is not strong enough to say as if I already collected. Therefore, you're a Mason. Exactly. So the person leave things the way they are. If you lend someone money to start, but you lend somebody, you lend money to Reuben, and Reuben doesn't have anything, so you go to the buyers, those who bought some of those assets. When you lent the money, Reuben had assets, but he sold it over the years, over the time. You can go to these lukuchas, to these buyers, and retrieve them. So you're hating, so this is very if all you have is a loan, a verbal loan, you have no right to go to the lukuchas. And we'll see in the Gemara later why, whether Shabud is the rights or whether the debt is the lien on the property is Ma'atayr and Rabbanon. But either way, if it's an oral loan, you cannot collect from buyers because they didn't know to protect themselves. So it's not fair. They bought a property, it's not fair. So all you can collect is the Chach and the Chayim from the unencumbered properties. Boy, you Shmuel. Shmuel asks an interesting question. The Ikna V'Konam. What happens properties? Okay, you lent money to Reuben in 19 whatever, sorry, in Topshin Pay. And after you lent the money, Reuben went and bought the properties. And then he sold it. Are they included in the properties that are as encumbrance? In other words, is it only about the properties already owned or even about future properties as well? Even if he writes in the stuff, the Kanina I bought the Ekna, I will buy, can you, just like we have a rule, you cannot sell something that you don't have in the rule. You cannot make a transaction on. How do we view shibud? Is shibud like a kinyan, and they cannot make a kinyan on something that doesn't exist? Or shibud is more on the person, and from the person it devolves on his assets. And since the person is here, the labor is here, so any properties he buys in the future, all that happens is the debt that this particular person has now spins off onto the property as well. How do we view it? So he's like, "But that I'm according to the kinyonim. You can make transactions on items that don't exist yet. I'll marry you after you become a ger, or after your husband divorces you, or after your sister die, whatever it is. Like the Bible, not a question. The bad kind of course. If you make a kinyan in the future, then even if you hold that shibud is just a direct kinyan on the land, you can make a kinyan for the future. You can't make kinyan in the future. So how do we view the relationship between the debt and the property? Is it a separate, like two shibudim happen at the same time? One is a shibud haguf, you personally, and one is a shibud on all the chasim. So anything which was not around at the time, there's no shibud on. So if you bought it later, it doesn't happen. Or is it only one shibud in the goof? But that's the cause, and the effect is that it spreads to all of your assets. So just because it wasn't here at the time doesn't matter. The shibud is still there, so whatever you buy, you bought it. Which one is it? You can't. I'm going to be touch my coming here. It says there, the Chachamim say, it says there, what happens if Reuven says to Shimon, you owe me $100 and here's my shtar. And Shimon says, I definitely paid you back. But Haraya, you sold me a property 6 months later. Now, if I owe you $100, would you sell me a property and take my money? First, you would collect the debt before you go ahead and sell me a property. So the fact that you sold me a property is evidence that you that I paid you back. So Adman says, on the contrary, this guy was an intelligent person. What he did was he gave you a property, and now we'll take it back because he had nobody. He knew he kind of collecting a man. You're taking your money and hiding assets. He was smart. He sold you a property, and then because he's a man with a lender, he goes to you. You don't have cash. He'll take your property. That's so now look. Think about it. That property that he sold him happened after the debt, after the loan, and yet it says he can go ahead and collect the property. Doesn't that prove that the lien is not limited to those properties that he had at the time of the loan? Even property he bought afterwards, the Malda has a right to take it back. I don't understand why he would. I mean, who? Because you have nothing. Very simple. Very simple. Very simple. Shimon has no properties, no land, and he's a conniving person. I come over to Shimon, Shimon, you owe me $100. Ainley. And then Bezin, if you tell Ainley that there's nothing you can do. So he'll never get paid. He knows he'll never get paid back for you. But if he sells you a property, you can speak from the fact that money to Ainley, I'm going to take back the property. And you gave me cash for the property. So the property, I fully paid for. And now I'm going to take the property in lieu of the loan. Very clever. He gave him it. No, I'm not gave him it. He sold him. Okay, that's a little different there. So the Rav is going to ask, and Rabbi Yosef, interesting is Rav, because this is for Putra for Baya. So what are you comparing? We're talking about Lekuchas, he's talking about the borrower himself. Of course, the borrower himself, even if he bought a property 20 years later, if he has to pay with the property, why would you think otherwise? Shavik has the same thing. The question is, do you have a right to go to the Lekuchas and force him to pay back? In fact, you have to think, what was Rabbi Yosef Svara? But this time it's Rav. Says the Gemara, let's go. Clever. So it wasn't Chacham say. Clever. Shemochel is a karka. Reuven sold the property. The lender sold the property to the borrower. Can I go and take it from him back? You're talking about directly from the borrower. I feel you can take the shirt off his back. So why should probably anywhere? We're talking about from the kuchas. We're talking about where the labor bought new properties after the debt and they unsold it, or new properties and he passed it on to the children. Now we know that the nechasim of the borrower is meshubah to the Baal Chayv even after he dies. The question is, can the Baal Chayv go ahead and take from these properties which only came into existence after the debt? From our Mishnah right there, Toshma. So this is my Mishnah here. Because what happened here, if the son died after the father, what's about Chayv's timing? Chayv says the son died after the father, which means for 1 minute he had his father's property. Therefore now there's a debt on I have a right to these assets. But these assets came into the equation only after the loan. So what right does the Baal Chayv have? So it's clear from here that when we say that you can go to the Chosim or Shabbatim, doesn't only mean the land, the asset you already had, even ones you bought afterwards. Come in here. No, for the bias, the house landlord, him and his father, or my teacher, those who bequeath him, I saw the teacher about his outstanding debt. Here, she I mean, not Ben message, and the Yosef father say the son died first. But I can't make then. Oh, about the Chay was a message, and I have Isaac that if you're telling me the Ikne Konomach, the Ikne Konomach, that anything which he bought afterwards and sold it, and he bought afterwards, and he bequeathed it, there's no lien on those properties because the whole idea of shibud is there's two shibudim. There's a shibud on the goof and there's a shibud on the chasim. Is nehina mida of meis bereisha. So what if the father died first? Let's say the Baal Chayv is right. The father died first. And let's say the son yashin it. But the Baal Chayv has no right to it. Because now it's in the hand of the ocean. The iknu, this happened after the event and now it's passed on to the ocean. Why should the Baal Chayv get paid from it? Introduces a new variable. We learned so far there's mitzvah mitzvah machas misa shchimera. Now we learn a new thing. That is, Nachman Zeira Chavin, our friend, Targma, he said there's a concept called mitzvah ala yisaimim lefroya chayvasavir. Even though there's no encumbrance on the property, but if you father buy an asset, you have a mitzvah covered of your father to pay off his debts. And in fact, we say kaifin. Machlekes are saying if it goes even to metaltlin to pay off your father. So said it's a mitzvah on the Yisaimim to pay off their father's debts. And therefore, true, maybe there's no encumbrance on the land, but doesn't matter. If Reuben outlived his father and he inherited the properties, it's the duty on the son to pay off their father's debts. And that's why the Baal Chayv is entitled to collect from this, not because there's actually a lien on the property itself. Maskal Ravashi, Ravashi asks, Milva al pehu, it's a milva al peh, and since it's a milva al peh, so you're telling me that Minhad, what are you trying to argue? You're trying to argue there's no lien on the property. There's no shibud. There was only those assets that existed at the time of the loan are encumbered, and anything beyond that point is unencumbered. It means so beyond that point, it's as if it's an oral loan. The whole idea of a verb of a loan in the shtar is that there's a lien on the property. You tell me that as far as this property is concerned, there's no lien on the property. In other words, it's only technically a verbal loan. And the rule is that a milva peg, you do not go to Yarshim. We'll see later in Machlekes, but you don't go to Yarshim to collect. They're not mechuyev to pay it off. But both say milva al peh. They say in the very end of Bava Basra that a milva peh you don't collect from Yoshin. When do we say that there's a mitzvah for Yisraelim to pay or the father's debts? Only if it's an ashtar, but not if it's a milva peh. So milva peh ain't no gleiva min hayoshim min kuchas hayim lipshat na mishnah. So clearly our Mishnah holds there is a debt, there is a lien on the assets, even though that the son only would have had it now when the building collapsed. Is anybody right? Elahamani, the author of our Mishnah, is Ameiri. We started out this whole Gemara, and the introduction was that according to Ameiri, believes that kinyonim, you can transact something that doesn't even exist right now, but one day it'll be there. Same thing over here. You can transact, you can make a shibud for properties in the future as well, and you think that he'll buy later on. But we're asking, according to Chacham, that a kinyan doesn't work. How do we view shibud? Is it like a kinyan that's directly on the property, or is it like from the person devolves from the group? But even in Rameir, the first one, know why don't we go a bit further? Remember, Rameir says you makar only a davar da avida l'asa. Can you say that this avida l'asa unless we can say that naturally a son outlives his father? Apiteva, a son outlives his father.
Like next year's crop.
Something that you love after will happen. It's not paid his dekel avida d'asa. That's why he works. The fruits of a tree is going to grow. But other thing which you don't know for sure is going to happen, I'm making a transaction or something we don't know what's going to happen. You buy this property, I'm going to sell it to you, but who said you'll ever buy the property? So what do you call it? Over here we can say it is avida d'asa because minastam generally the father dies first, the kid yashins, and the kid dies many years later. So it is considered avida d'asa according to Rameir as well. So this Rameir, so basically not every proof you're going to bring to me that a property is after the date of the loan works and there's an encumbrance on it. I'll tell you Rameir, who believes that you can make kinyanim for the future. El Harmarameid, Amar, oh, the Makdav Shabbat, a person can be makna something Shabbat Balayla. Rabbi Yaakov, not Mashmei Ravina. Toshma coming here. We have a rule. We had this right in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah as well. That is that a star chayv is a star chayv hamuktim and a star chayv muchid. The whole sugi we had is in the first page of Bava, and that is if you take a star. Let's say today's the 15th day of Nisan, and I predate it for the first day of Nisan. It ruins the whole star. Why does it ruin the whole star? Because you are going to go now to people who bought properties prior to Tezvav Nisan, when in fact, at the time when you bought the property, there was no encumbrance on the land because there's no loan. So you're going to cheat. Therefore, we say that the star is totally worthless, even for post that date. What about a star muchar? If you write a later date, you borrow the money in the Shchedesh Nisan, and I write it in the Shchedesh Sivan. The Kuchel are very happy. But anything that they bought during that 2-month period, he cannot collect from. And the din is that it's kosher. In fact, all he did was he harmed himself. The lender now denied himself any activities that happened between the Shchedesh Nisan and the Shchedesh Sivan. So therefore, it's all right. That's the din. Now says the Gemara, Rabbi Yaakov and Habkoid, Mashmei Ravina, Toshma coming in, Shtar Chayv, Hamagdam and Shtar Chayv, that is early as possible as possible. But those you delay the time, Kshed is kosher. Now, the Iknekana if you can tell me any future properties bought are not included, by post dating it, you're now harming all these people. In other words, if you can tell me that the date was really Chedesh Nisan, and any property that he bought after the Chedesh Nisan are not included in the star, because you say that, because the Loy Bala Olam wasn't existing. But now that by putting the date of the Chedesh Sivan, all those properties that were sold between the Chedesh Nisan and the Chedesh Sivan will be included in the star. When technically they shouldn't. If you hold that the din is that, I don't care when you bought the property, even afterwards, it's included. There's nothing wrong with a later date. But if you're telling me that the din is that anything after that date is not included, then why shtar muchid kosher? Then you harm all these lukuchas in between. That if he bought and he sold, or he bought and he bequeathed, not included, is muchadi na mike shady. And why is it kosher? This is a case of things that happen later. What's the obvious answer? Mani Ramedi. So every proof you're going to bring me that it is effective even post the date of the loan, new properties you bought are included, will follow Rameir that a kinyan, so it doesn't prove one way or another as far as the Chachamim are concerned. Amani Ramedi, other makad lo shabalam. You could deal with future kinyanim. Amar Rav Misharshim, Mashmei de Rav, says Rav Misharshim, the name of Rav, Toshma, come in here. It says L'Shavach Kakois. What happened here is that the Balchayv, the lender, goes to the borrower. The borrower has no cash. He's cash strapped, so he goes to one of the buyers. But the buyer, meanwhile, invested in the property and improved the quality of the property. So there's the property itself, the value, and then you have the shevach, the improvement. So can now the buyer turns around back to his seller, the vendor, which was the borrower, and says, reimburse me. Right? Because the chray is to safer we follow. That means that even if the star did not say the sale, the contract of sale did not say, and if the land gets taken away from you, I'm going to reimburse you. It's automatic. Chray, we pass chray is to safer. It's a mistake. The safer got to put it in, but it means nothing. So the purchaser has a right to go back to the vendor and say, reimburse me. Now he gets reimbursed for the property and also gets reimbursed for the improvement. But there's a difference. Toshma l'shavach kakois. Eitzar, how does he collect for the improvement of the karka? The thing is, you cannot, when it comes to let's say the loan is $100 and the guy doesn't have it, so he goes to one of the purchasers and he takes and he takes the property there. That property has the karka and the shevach. It's $100 a property, but it's $50 worth of improvements on it. So he goes back to the borrower, which is his vendor, and he says, pay me back. He can, if the vendor has the money, he can go to the lekuchas, because he came before them. He can go to other lekuchas and take back a property equal to what he had. But the shevach, he can't. We learned in Hanazakin that there's a special takana that we made that things which have no cap, we don't collect from the chosim. Otherwise, nobody will buy property ever. The whole commercial system is going to collapse. People have to know, the risks so that they can work it out. But if the risk is incalculable, then nobody's going to buy anything. Why would you buy? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So the shevach, you cannot go to the choshesh body. You can only go directly to your vendor, which is the borrower. Improved it. Came along Balchayv Tarfa and took it away. Kishu Goiva when he collects. Goiva is like if he goes back to his vendor and the vendor doesn't have any money, he can go to any of the buyers who bought afterwards and collect from them. It's a loan, it's a debt that he has first. But the improvements he can only collect directly from the vendor, nowhere else. Now, but now if you tell me any new debts are not included, any new property not included, why can he collect? The shvach wasn't there at the time. Why is the vendor mechuyev to reimburse him for the shvach? It was not included at the time. The Gemara again. Now the Gemara says, there's a fascinating machlekes. I don't know why I just remember it between the Mashah and the Mashal. What happens if we're talking about Reuven didn't have property, only bought the property afterwards? So what happens? Reuven is let's say the borrower, and what do you call it? Shimon is a buyer. Shimon bought property from him, and maybe Levi, Yehuda, a whole bunch of people bought. Then comes along Binyamin, and Reuven has only one asset, but he bought Bnei Chaydin after the loan. We're talking about the nechasim mishabadim his property that he had and he sold it on to somebody else. Can you collect it if it came into existence after the loan? What about Bnei Chaydin? The din is normally you cannot collect from any of the mishabadim unless first you go to the borrower, you take what he has. If he doesn't have, then you move on to the lekuchas. What about what the borrower has, which did not exist at the time of the loan? He won the lottery a month later, so now he bought all these properties. Can the lender still go directly to the lekuchas because these bnei chayim were not in existence at the time of the loan, or it doesn't matter when it comes to bnei chayim? Who cares? The Mashal says the same question in Gemara here, but instead of focusing on the Meshabadim, he focuses on the Chayim. The Mashal says a very interesting idea. He says, why Taka can't you go directly to the buyers? Why do you have to go first to the borrower? I have a lien on the property. I like the property. I'm going to go collect it. You know why you can't? Because the buyer can say, we had when I bought this field, there were other fields there. Why do you think I bought it? Because I knew that you'll never come to me. So that taina is a valid taina to prevent the lender from going directly to him. But he can't say that if at the time of the loan there were no other properties. He won the lottery a month later. So then the lender has the right to go, even though there's bnei chayrin by the borrower, he has the right to go to the lekuchas and take from them. Big chiddush on the mashal, but it makes sense. And the Mashal argues, and he says that's not the reason why, because he nachtil chamak of ligvus menu. That line, where did the Gemara use that line? That line is if you have 3 buyers, you have to go to the last one first. You can't go to you happen to like the field that the first buyer bought, so the lender and the buyer has no money, so you want to go to the buyers. Instead of going to the third one, you want the first one. The first one has that's what the Gemara uses the title. First said, "Wow, when I bought this property, there were 2 others there. You go to them, leave me alone." But to use that as the mashah for bnei chayrin, that's not the vart. He says the vart is you don't go to the Arav, to the guarantor, until first you go to the borrower. Arav Kabbalah is the only exception, but otherwise, a regular Arav, you don't go to the Arav first. You go first to the borrower, then you go to the guarantors. The fields are guarantors. That's what it is. And in fact, that's the more usual Lashon, that they are raven. The Nechasim are your Arav. And therefore, you cannot go to the buyer. First, you got to go to the Nechayim. Interesting machlekes. Same as our Gemara here, but focusing on the bnei chayrin part rather than the one part. Let's continue. If you want to say, if you bought new things and you unsold it, or the you bought new things and you bequeathed it, they're not included in the debt to the lender. No holam mishtabed. That's it. End the story. Nowhere to go further. But if you're going to say that mishtabed, that it is mishtabed. That anything that even future debts are included. Why? Because it's a spin-off from the Shibud Haguf, and since the borrower is still there, so any new properties he bought automatically become included in these encumbrances. What about lava the chazer, the chazer v'kana? Mahu. What happens if he bought another property and he unsold that one? So now there was two in line. There's Shimon and Levi. After the debt took place between Reuben and Benjamin. A month later, Shimon he bought a property and he sold it to Shimon. A month after that, he bought a property and sold it to Levi. Now, these two properties came about after the debt. Now, if you hold that he has a right to, they're all included. Is there a sense of priorities? Because we know, just like when it comes to a normal case, you can only go to the last lekuach, not to the first one. What about this case here in the new properties? The kama mishtabed or the basa mishtabed? This new debt it goes on the property or on the second property? Says the which one does it go on? So what happened was he made two loans. He went to one loan and he made a loan and then he bought a property and afterwards. Then he made another loan and he bought a property and again he wrote there that all my nechasim that I have and the nechasim in the future are all included. And then he sold them. The properties already bequeathed them to Yoshev. So now both lenders. You have two lenders now. You have lender from loan number one and lender from loan number two. Since he wrote all future properties, is there a priority who gets, these both were bought afterwards, but one was bought a month before, one after. Does anyone have a right of priority first? And what's the question? The question is, do we say that when he made a second loan and he said in the second loan, all my future properties, do we say it's as if he changed his mind regarding the first loan? And therefore, the first loan, no longer future properties are included. It's only included for those in the second loan. And therefore, this property, he made two loans, but he bought a property afterwards. Do we say that the first loan, the lender is the one who has a right to it? Because at the time, he was the first one. Or do we say, and the property was bought only after both loans were already made? Or do we say the second one, because when he wrote to the second one, any future properties, that basically means it can't be both. That means he's canceling the first agreement that he made, and he's giving it over to the second one. How do we view that? Different ways of that's how the Rambam looks. How does he have a right to cancel a shibud? Someone else. It's about the future. It hasn't happened yet. The property doesn't exist yet. Coldman, the property doesn't, because he didn't buy it yet. So therefore, I'm taking it off. It hasn't happened. I can take it off. Says the Gemara. Interesting what Gemara says here. The way that Rambam learns. One second. Aram Nachman, Hamil Sibailan, this question was asked, and they sent to us from Etzro, Rishon Kana. In Etzro, they said, definitely the first guy is Kana, because his star was first, and therefore he has first rights. Rav Huna says that we divide it equally. What do you mean equally? Pro rata. If one guy's loan was $100 and one guy's loan was $150, and the property sachakel was worth, let's say, $200, then what you do is 100. This guy has 3/5. This guy has 2/5. So you divide the value of the land in fifths, and you divide it pro rata. So they both have a chelik in the property. You divide it pro rata. Because when you bought this property, both loans were already out there, so they both had already this condition. So the Gemara. Madura Kama Ravashi. There's a Madura Kama Madura Basra. The first time Rav Ashi learned it, and the second time. And the Rashbam says, Rav Ashi gave a Yachikalo 2 months a year. We had in fifth prayer in Brachas in the beginning that they used to Tishrei and this, and they used to have Yachikalo or whatever, or others did just opposite. And they would learn 2 months a year. Rav Ashi learned 2 months a year. It took him 30 years to go through Shas once. It took him another 30 years to go through Shas the second time. Even though we had an Amoraim who learned Shas every 30 days, the Rashbam says that 30 years it took him. Look at Rashbam here. Madura Basra was Kishachaza Talmud Pam Shnia. He revised Shas a second time, and he says it took him Shishim. It says Rav Ashi Chaya Shishim Shana. Does that mean actually he lived 60 years? And how did he finish Shas 60 years? But he lived. Not that he lived 60 years, but he was a Magid for 60 years. Over Chol Shana every year. Machzil Talmud every year he would go learning. 2 months a year, Nisan B'Tishrei. Ukel Shegia Shloishim Shana, 30 years on, see him called Talmud. When 30 years after Shurim, he finished Shas once, so we're much better. In 7.5 years, we do the whole Shas. L'chein Asa B'Shloishim Shanim Acharonim, It took him another 30 years to go through Shas.
Once a year.
Okay, true.
It's interesting. You create the culture. The biggest one.
Yeah, but that's when some of the we had in Ksubas there all the Yachikalas and everything else. But they used to learn. Yeah, everybody came in that time to learn Yom Tov and all that. True. We have the Abaye in Brochas. The Abaye said, "Leave me alone. I got to work now. And you all go home and do your work so that you can learn other times of the year. You have to work. You have to learn." Umadura kama ainu shleishim shanim l'shayin in the first 30 years. Umadura basta shleishim nachrein. Took him 30 years to go through Shas. Here's kosher. So Rav Hirschberg used to say, "How do you know that Yosef and Yaakov learned in the literature yeshiva? Because 22 years later, they're still learning the same sugya." Yeah, it took him 30 years in Ravashi to go through Shas. So wasn't much different. Now, so what happened after? So Ravashi changed his mind. Ravashi Amladishan Kana. The first 30 years he learned Shas, he said that the first guy is Kana. Madura Basra, when he learned Shas the second time, 30 years later, Ravashi Amlan Yachleku. Like they remembered what he said 30 years ago. So now they said, 30 years later. The Hilchas Yachleku, that since this property was bought after both loans were already there, and in both loans you said any future things, they both now have a lien on it. Then the Gemara finished the Gemara. Mesa has a question. It said the Shevach HaKois. You tell me Yachleku. It said the Shevach of the Kakois. How does it do? Case we just learned before. How does Shemach Hasar Beisol? The fellow Bichon improved it. The Bava Basra Daf. Bava came along and took it away. Kishu Goiva when he collects. Goiva is Akedah Chashabadim. And the Shevach takes Nechasim Nekaidim. Now the Misa, if so, you have two lenders here now. You have the guy who lent the money, and you have the first buyer, and then you have the second buyer who just lost his property, right? And he lost the property to the lender. Where's the lender going when he to get his property back? He goes to the what do you call it? He goes to a buyer, a later buyer, to collect his property back. So which means now that you have, and that buyer now has to go and get reimbursed from the lender. So now you have two lenders now to this borrower. You have the second buyer and the first buyer. They're both lenders. And he said, and the shevach he get from the properties that I had and all future properties. So if it's from all future properties, then why should he collect the whole shevach? We just said we don't care who bought first, who bought second. What matters is when this property came on the scene. This property came on the scene only now. So you have, according to the Madura Basra Daf, each one, you only should be able to collect half a shevach because the other buyer also is entitled to get half the property. My guy, all he collects is half of the shevach. I finished the Gemara here, and tomorrow we'll continue the same idea of knowing who died first.